Welcome to Behavioral Grooves, the podcast that explores the complexities of life as a human being through a behavioral science lens. I'm Kurt Nelson.
And I'm Tim Houlihan, and we like to explore cool ideas on how to live in a complex world so that we can help you find your groove.
And one of the ways we find our groove is through knowledge. Sometimes it's new ideas, sometimes repeated ideas that are presented in new and unique ways, and sometimes it's just a reminder of old ideas that deserve a new look. And that brings us to our grooving session for today, our most recommendable books that we read in 2022. Let me put a little caveat on that, Mr. Houlihan, because we've talked about this, and we've read some books in 2022 that were actually published in other years, and we might give them honorable mentions, but I think at this point we're focusing just on those books that have been published in 2022.
Yeah, so it's just the newest stuff. That sounds great, Kurt. And this is a great topic. And I'm assuming that you've come prepared with your standard list of your 27 favorite books ready to go.
You're not that far off, man. I mean, this year was really, I found it at least. I found it really hard to boil down to a short list.
Yeah.
I think I say this every year. Don't we say this every year?
Oh, we
I think
do.
We say this almost every year, right? But this year it was particularly hard, right? We read some really, I don't know how many reallys I can say, but all the reallys I could say, just imagine that, really good books this year. And we talked with some really just intelligent, clever, thoughtful authors. It was fantastic.
Okay, so agree. So however many times I can agree on that. And, this might still be a pandemic effect that we're coming out of, all the writing that happened during the pandemic, but it was a rich year for behavioral science books. So let's get started.
Okay, Tim. Why don't we start with you?
All right.
And we each get 5 books, right?
But more or less.
In no particular order. We're not like rating these on a scale here. But what's your first one that you want to recommend?
Oh well, let's start with Robert Livingston's book, The Conversation. Had a huge impact on me, in part because it was this beautiful confirmation of a conversation that I had with some dear friends who are people of color. And years ago, I was sitting down at dinner with them, and I'm like, what can I do as a privileged white male? And they just said, have the conversation. And so I love that Robert Livingston brought this to life. I thought the book is very practical. It's very focused, and he gives great anecdotes and great science to bring the story to life. So that's
the anecdotes.
That's 2 cents,
the anecdotes are what made that book for me. It was fantastic, and I loved our conversation. I thought the book was great. I thought our conversation with him was even better. Oh my gosh, it was just it just again blew me away.
Okay.
Blew me away.
How about you, Kurt? What fits into your top 5?
All right. I know we're going to be both kind of talking about all of these. So David McRaney, right?
Yeah.
Change Your Mind. I mean, I use the examples in that book over and over and over again when I'm talking to people. And not just about behavioral science things, about many things, about why we live in this world where we have these, it feels like we're more divisive and spread apart and kind of our tribal nature. And I bring in, the story that David tells of some of the narratives. And again, David wrote this book like a journalist, not a researcher, but he has all the science behind it. So it was readable. It was interesting, captured my attention. I'm like, what's going to happen next? And I just loved that book and the insights that I took. And again, we can bring that back to past years where we've talked with people about, conspiracy theories and other things. But this was really, not only did it bring in some of those stories that are fun, but some practical elements on how we can really try to influence people and change minds and get them out of crazy conspiracy theory thinking.
I agree. What I liked about David's book was sort of the fringier elements where he pushed the boundaries on this idea of mind changing to sort of the nth degree, rather than the way a lot of a lot of psychological research is looking for sort of mainstream ideas. He kind of pushed it to the edge in a way that really got my attention, and he did it in a compassionate and very human way, and again backed it up with solid research. Told it with a fantastic narrative. So
I mean, the stories that he
terrific.
brought in. The stories he brought in from, the BBC show, bringing the people over about 9/11 to the Baptist, what is the Southborough Baptist Church, or not Southborough, whatever that is, and, the people who had left that, and kind of, dissecting these individual stories to kind of pull out the real nuggets. Fantastic book.
Yep.
So
agreed. Okay, so let's see. So it's back on me. How about I want to talk about Henry G's book, A Short History of Life on Earth. My God, like if we think about Sapolsky's work as and the way that he talks about our behaviors, like from a moment before, a minute before, hours before, days before, months before. Henry takes a look at how did our behavior evolve from millennia ago. And I love that. I thought that it was just fantastic in digging deep into this is how we got to where we are. It's a partial explanation of how we got to where we are today, and he does it in a beautiful way. It is short, it's concise, it's pithy and fun and on point all the time. That's my take.
And it talks about the development of the anus. So, I mean, anytime you have a book talks about the development of the anus, man, I got to read it, right? So,
of course.
All of the things that you said, Tim, without being facetious like I was there, all of the things you said I think are there. And what fascinated me is, it's an evolutionary book, but there's so much behavioral science that comes out of it. Yeah. And so I love when when we read stuff that gives a different perspective. And this is one of those books that I think shines the light on things from a very different viewpoint.
Yeah.
And allows us to maybe get a different perspective on some of these things. And I love that part. So
how about you? What's next?
Well, yours and my favorite, I know this is on your list, our the guest that has been with us most often.
Yeah.
The wonderful and talented and brilliant Annie Duke and her new book, Quit. And again, this perspective building that I just talked about with Henry G, same thing. It's like this common wisdom. Oh, we gotta just push through. Winners never quit, and
quitters never win.
Quitters never win, and all of these kind of things. And Annie just said, "Hang on a second here. Hang on. That's not really how life works." This idea, and particularly given her background in poker and understanding that if I stayed in every hand, I'm going to lose my shirt, right?
Totally.
And I'm going to go and bankrupt and be out of there really quickly. And just the way, again, that she brings in and weaves stories in is just mesmerizing and insightful, and you just take away, again, I talked about David McCraney and kind of, some of the stories that he tells in there. I talk about Annie's book and quitting and the stories that she brought up in there across the board to many different people.
What do we love? What do we love about all the books that we read? The things that really grab our attention are the ones that are different. And Annie took this counterintuitive model and demonstrated how important it is, how important quitting is, not just for our human survival, but for success in the world, like in relationships, in business deals, in all kinds of great examples that, of course, and she backs it up with good science and good stories.
Well, and the idea that she goes into this, it's not just about quitting, it's quitting at the right time.
Yeah.
And the idea that, sometimes we don't quit fast enough, and sometimes we don't stick out things long enough, and kind of identifying the decision model that should go into, again, coming back to decision models, into how you think about quitting and giving you some really practical insights into your own ideas about this. And so it becomes not just a great book that gives you this information, but it's a practical tool. I love it.
And one more thing about that is...
and one more thing about Annie.
Gosh, actually, and Richard Thaler said that most of the time we're actually not making a decision to quit. The decision's already made. And this, I think, is a big human fallacy that we have, that we feel like we made the decision to stop doing something that wasn't in our best interest. But really, by the time that we've actually gotten to that point, it's already done. And I feel like that's an awareness that I would love to bring to the whole damn world, is wake up and just be aware when things are going so far south. Like, at some point, you're just not even going to make a decision. You're just going to...
All right.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Next on your list, sir?
Ayelet Fishbach's book. Oh, golly. I mean, the fact that she brought such new light, fresh light to motivation and goals was really rewarding for me. I really, you and I have both spent a lot of time on motivation and goals. Like, it's one of our favorite things to work on. The research that we've done on this is meaningful to us, and Ayelet's work just amped it up a notch. And so, if you're at all interested in the lovely and intricate connectivity between motivation and goals, Ayelet's book, I think, was just fantastic.
Yeah, ditto. And to your point, this is the work that I do on almost a daily basis, is working with companies about how are your goals being set, how can you motivate your employees more, what are the things that we can bring to it. And the Ayelet's book brought a fresh look on stuff that I thought I knew, like the back of my hand.
Yeah.
And I didn't. It was like, holy crap, that is cool.
Yeah.
And it's I love, again, those books where you can just take the information from them and apply it right away. And that's what Ayelet's book was for me.
Absolutely.
So,
okay. What's next on your list?
So I had a conversation. I remember my daughter and I were waiting for a reservation at a restaurant that we were eating at. And I was reading Seth Stevens-Davidowit's book, Don't Trust Your Gut. And I just started reading out loud from the book. And my daughter and me had this huge, great conversation around this book about some of the insights. Like, did you know that if you wanted to get a college scholarship, you should get into fencing? And all those, like, other things that you just don't, that he brings this data perspective, but he brings it in a fun storytelling way, and it's like he brings himself into this book, which I absolutely loved.
Well, because he's not just smart, he's a smart ass too. And I love, I mean, it's always fun to talk to Seth about that. But this book really reharmonized the importance of behavioral science and data science going hand in hand. That when there is good data science, we can absolutely discover important behavioral insights from good data, and that was a big takeaway for me. And I certainly want to recommend people check it out for a whole bunch of reasons, because it's great data.
It's great data, and he's uncovered the secret to happiness, which is having sex with your spouse or loved one on a beach in the evening in a warm, setting. And if you can do that every night, you're gonna be just happy as like I don't know.
Seal.
That was awesome. Yeah. A seal in eating tuna. I don't know. All right. Last book of the five that we each get to pick for you, Mr.
I'm gonna choose John List's book on the voltage effect, in part because I feel like John it spoke to the idea of scaling a concept in a really meaningful and fresh way. Now, he's not the first one to cover this. Clayton Christensen has addressed this in years past, and Clayton Christensen's work is brilliant. Innovator's Dilemma, those kinds of books, we won't go into those. But I feel like John brought a very fresh and important economic view on scaling, a behavioral science view to scaling that was really helpful for me to really think about, okay, what's the difference between a good idea and a scalable idea? So, so that I just want to put that as the last one for me.
And just raising the questions that we need to ask that we might have, and again, kind of on the forefront. I think that we've had a couple other books this year on scaling in various different pieces from different people, and kind of at the forefront of that idea that, hey, we need to really be thinking about this as behavioral scientists, because we can do the best experiment in the world and get fantastic, impactful results that are, they're valid, and the R factor, we fit all of the
no p hacking, all those kinds of things.
Yeah, none of that, and yet they don't scale because of these other factors that John points out. And so I think for a behavioral scientist perspective, huge book from that perspective.
Okay, Kurt, what's going to round out your list?
I'm just regretting that this is the last one that we're talking about.
That's such a bad setup.
but it is Dan Pink's Regret. Yeah. And again, you mentioned this earlier, this idea that, one of the common threads through all of these books with us is this novelty, this new perspective, taking a common element and maybe twisting how we think about it. And I think Dan did that with Regret. Again, this idea that we try to avoid regret, and we talk about, I don't have any regrets, and that isn't probably the best way to live a full and robust and really purposeful life. Regret has power.
Yes.
And we should tap into that power and not be fearful of it, but also understand it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I don't know what else to say about it, but the book reads in such an interesting way. We have both commented about this frequently, about how the book sort of starts slow and continues to build and build and build, and by the time you get like the last two chapters, like every word is just gripping. It's almost like a whodunit, where you're like, okay, what's going to happen next? And I love that about just reading it. But yeah, the insights are absolutely astounding.
I agree, and that is one thing I think if people pick this up and read, you get through chapter 1 and chapter 2, and you're going, oh, where is this going? Trust us.
Oh yeah,
it just builds and gets better and better, and you just take it, and you got actionable. Again, two things, right? Novel kind of things, new perspectives on how we look at the world, and then also applicable, right? I mean, that you can take something from all of these books and say, hey, I can apply this to my life.
How about some?
All right, so those are our top 10. But I know that we got to talk about more. Well, we can't just leave it at those, because we'd be remiss. We'd regret if we did not talk about any of these others. And we know I can use the power of that for potential, that future
anticipated
state
regret.
That I would anticipated regret. Thank you, and we can use that to not have that happen.
Yeah. Thank you to Roy Baumeister for alerting us to anticipated regress. So I just want to call attention to a couple of books that I thought were just really interesting. Actually, Brian Lowry's work is on finding meaning in life. I just thought was fantastic. And then the combination of Jennifer Moss's and Jonathan Malesik's work on burnout. Jonathan from a philosophical perspective, Jennifer from a very practical corporate perspective. I just really love those. Just want to give a shout out to them. And
I just have to shout out to Max Bazerman. The interview, he is such, just you feel the kindness and the intelligence and the thoughtfulness radiating out from him when we talk to him, but also in the book, when you read the book, it's just like, Oh, and he takes this very difficult subject of, complicity.
Yeah.
And one that I would typically avoid because I don't want to feel that pain of like, oh, am I complicit in this? And he makes it not that you don't feel that angst afterwards, but that you feel like, no, I have to act on that angst. Don't just let it simmer, but actually take some movement on it.
Yeah. How about Dolly Chug's book on
and again,
fighting bias? I mean, this is really great stuff. I have to give a shout out to Dolly's work, and kind of along those lines, Linda Babcock comes to mind. I just want to give a one sentence on the No Club. We've been heartfelt fans of Linda's for a long time, and she just continues to churn out absolutely fantastic stuff. So
well, and again, talking about different perspective and the applicability of that, and any woman who is out there, you need to read that book. It's that powerful.
As well as
and men should read it.
As well as every entitled man should be reading this book too. To go,
yeah. Here you go. All right. Just a couple others. Dilip and Nina on the behavioral science in the wild, the compilation again, bringing back, it goes back to Amal-John List and scale, but this idea of like, how do we take all these wonderful freaking insights that we have and bring them into organizations, and not only that, but how do we take the wonderful, beautiful insights that we get from organizations and bring that back into the research? And I think they did a fantastic job with it.
Yeah.
So
Zoe Chance's book, how about that?
Oh, whew.
Influence
is your superpower.
So much
right?
fun to read, and she's just really spot on with I think sort of the zeitgeist of leveraging the most current stuff. Again, it's very fresh and very fun and very applicable. So I think Zoe's work is worth mentioning as well.
Again, shout out to Sam Tatum, Evolutionary Ideas. That is, fantastic. And again, this idea of looking into nature to take and kind of figure out what we can do. Again, simple concept, but different lens, and a great lens that I think we can all apply. And then this is the one that we talked about that we're going, was this actually published in 2022 or 2021?
Yeah.
But it was published in 2021, but it's still going to get an honorable mention. Paul Bloom and The Sweet Spot. Again, this idea that, if we all lived in this perfectly happy world that didn't have any, pressure or pain or anything, that we probably wouldn't like it as much as we think we would. It's kind of the Brave New World, as my daughter's reading, the Brave New World, where, just take some Soma and feel happy. Grandma Soma makes all your 12 worries go away, or whatever the statement is in there. And Paul's saying, no, we actually, search out some of those stressful, painful things.
And we benefit from them.
It adds, and then we benefit from them. And we shouldn't shy away from that. And I love it. And I love the fact that I was reading it in the sauna, as he was talking about people, taking saunas and, sweating their ass off and feeling uncomfortable in them, as one of the examples. So,
and I just have to say one other thing about Paul's book is that it kind of helped me look at finding my groove with a fresh lens.
Yes,
that's so. Listeners, if you're kind of curious about that, check out The Sweet Spot. So with that. With that, can we wrap this up? Is this a wrap?
I mean, we could go on and on and on, so I think we better wrap it up.
We read a lot of great books this year, but these
had a lot of great guests, all of them fantastic.
These garnered our attention, and I just want to say thank you to our listeners again for sharing in this journey with us. Check out these books because they're great. They're really, really great. And if not, just check out the episodes where we talk to the authors, because I think that's a good thing too.
They're great too. So thank you, everybody, and read some books to go out and find your groove.